Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Craig Zelzer with Lucille Jade Galvan here for the latest episode. It's episode 11, season 9 of the Social Change Career Podcast. And we're going to be talking about career insights for aspiring impact professionals based in the Global South. We're delighted to have everyone here with us today, and especially Jade for making time. It's 8 a.m. in Colombia and 9 p.m. a little bit after 9 p.m. in Manila in the Philippines. So we've got a huge time difference, but we managed to find something. This episode is supported by the Rotary Peace Fellowship, which is one of the world's top fellowships for social impact professionals. So if you're looking for full funding to do a master's degree or one of 2 professional certificates in peace and development related fields, either based in Thailand or in Uganda, check out the fellowship. I'll put the link here. And I will share a little bit about Jade's background. She is currently the Career Services Director at the Asian Institute of Management, which is based in the Philippines, and she worked there previously from 2011 to 2016. She also has worked at the Nyang Business School at the Nyang Technology University in Singapore, and was the former head of career development and international programs at the Asian University for Women in Bangladesh, which is a wonderful institution. She's been working in corporate human resources for multinationals and other institutions, and she holds a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from the La Salle University, and also has a diploma in industrial relations from the University of the Philippines, and lots of other certifications. And she's currently doing master's research on just transition for achieving climate goals, which I want to hear. Actually, we need to definitely include that in the podcast, from the University of the Philippines School of Labor and Industrial Relations. For people who may not have participated in one of our podcasts before, they usually go about 45 minutes. And I'll ask questions for a few minutes, and then please feel free to put your questions and comments if you're watching on LinkedIn. And this eventually will be converted to an episode of the Social Change Career Podcast in 2 or 3 weeks. We have about 100 other episodes featuring brilliant innovators from all parts of the world, working in climate tech, innovative finance, engineering, reducing gender-based violence. And we always appreciate if people share the podcast and or do reviews on your favorite podcasting platform. While we're getting started, it'd be great to hear where people are watching from. So you can just put your comment. I can see I'll welcome a few people before we get started. Francine, let us know where you're watching from. Heba from Jordan, Tosvit from Tanzania, Ajung from South Sudan, Imelda from Kenya, and Avanish from India. Hopefully we have some other people let us know if anybody from Southeast Asia or from the US and Latin America. And again, anytime during the chat, please feel free to put questions or comments, and we'll bring them in throughout. One more person, then we'll get started. Mary Johanna from Manila, so great to see somebody else from Southeast Asia. And so just to get started off, Jade, thank you so much for taking time to share your wisdom. And actually, we were talking before, like you actually have been working in the field of career professional development, both in the corporate and academic world. So what in the world does it mean to have a career in careers?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Craig Zelzer, and also Dr. Raz. To be invited here today is an honor. So, as you've mentioned, I've been working in the career space for quite a number of years, but in fact, I have been a career changer myself. So, having started in human resources initially, and also teaching some ESL, and as an international management trainee for HR in the corporate sector before pivoting into higher education some 11 years back. But this industry in education is where I kind of stayed longer, and in particular, career services, because I've seen quite a motivation in the seismic changes that a career services role could have in terms of impact in students and also in societies where the students end up working for. So this kind of like forward nature of an education sector, forward thinking nature of an education sector would also kind of help us and career services in particular to really introduce how back to the students how they would prepare themselves and get reintegrated back into the world of work. So I think there's so much value in getting our next generation leaders and those who would really create impact in the countries where they come from, respectively, the combination of collaboration, and also in allowing students to be as independent as they are in terms of their decision making. That's only kind of like, I could say, the tipping point of what we could do in career services, but that also is the starting point for everyone, I feel.
Thank you so much, and welcome Nano Beko from South Africa, and please keep letting us know where you're watching from. So Jade, one question, like how would you summarize, let's say, either your entire career or the past 10 years? Like what are the central opportunities and challenges that you're working on?
Yes, so I think a lot of the exposure I've received both locally in our country and also across the Asian region is a lot to do with kind of like a change leadership initiative. And in not only myself in my career, but also in terms of the people who seek career advising with me and my team. And when I say change leadership, I think the challenge there is in getting, I not just individuals or groups, but societies to change for the better. And when that happens, it also entails a lot of, skills and as well as competencies needed in individuals, aside from the confidence that needs to be built in them, and if not, already innate in them, to get it out and really believe in individuals to be able to create the change that they would like to see in the world that they're living in, or in the societies where they operate. So let's say also in Asia, we know that in terms of culture, this is not a very vocal, you could say, culture that speaks its mind out. It also really takes a lot of encouragement, and at the same time, you could say training and development in order to get things systematized, and also, goals to be reached in a very timely manner as well. So another challenge I see, or I saw in my work for the past years, is also women representing in a wide variety of, let's say, social strata, and coming from various economic backgrounds or ethnicities, and getting their foot in the door in terms of decision making. I think that's also one thing that we see, traditionally being challenged, but also we are already in that phase where we're getting the boundaries, crossed, and hopefully we get as much talent out there to be role models and be pioneers and visionaries themselves, regardless of gender.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask one question about your skills, and then obviously, since you have so much experience mentoring others in their career development, about those skills. So if someone wanted to work at this intersection of career development, future work, upskilling, and thinking about not just where the career opportunities were, but where they're going, like what skills have you developed that you found the most useful? And what would you recommend for others who may want to work at some intersection that's similar to where you do your work?
Yeah, thank you. So I think what helped a lot as a baseline, as a starting point, is perhaps my degree in psychology to begin with. But without that kind of understanding of psychology, people could also start with a lot of self awareness, and that capacity to actually develop interpersonal skills by really getting to know people from all walks of life, being able to openly communicate and actively listen to individuals. So that's where one who's interested to get into this kind of role could start at the base level, and practice it more often. And as you could see, like also cross-cultural sensitivity and empathy plays a role in that too, because then when you have this openness to really take in as much information as there is available, and also being able to remove any barriers, you're able to actually make the dots connected, and understand where people are coming from in terms of their decisions in life, whether it's because of their personal experiences, family influences, societies that dictate, or even governments at the in the bigger picture. Um, and there's also at the management and leadership levels, different types of leaderships to be, exercised or practiced. Of course, as I've said earlier, there's change leadership, but there's also kind of like this collaborative leadership to be developed, and you can only get that when you're exposing yourself as well to different groups of people, and understanding dynamics of people across cultures, within your respective like groups, or even coming out of your comfort zone and really extending that out to um, a cross-cultural kind of situation. And when you're also faced with challenges of resources, trying to be innovative as well is something that a person in careers can also practice more often, and taking the risk, because that's the only way we're able to kind of like be more successful, if we do take the risks of trying something new and innovating the way we're doing things for the better. So there's technical skills to be had there, because there's also some form of analytics to be done when in terms of reporting. But naturally, somebody who could be as independent, organized, and result oriented would benefit in this particular role.
And so one more follow-up question, and then we'll get to skills for professionals. And also, please, we have someone from India, and so all over the world. Heba, thanks for your comments. We'll start sharing them, and please let us know where you're watching from. So just one other question. So one is, as you are hiring people for your team, can you talk a little about like what makes the difference between a competitive candidate and ones that aren't? And then when you think about whether you're reporting to the provost or the head of the university, like when someone's helping to run a career center, like what are the metrics of success that either you look for or the university board or leadership looks for in terms of how you're reporting that your work is valuable?
Yes. So maybe to start with the how candidates can be more competitive in their applications. To me, it's three things. First is being authentic, and it's as I've said earlier, a really keen sense of self awareness, you could say, because it's where everything circles back to. It takes skills to be very cognizant of one's behavioral drives, and that leads to like the decisions they come up with in life. It takes a lot of self awareness to actually communicate what you think you're good at and not good at, and also to be able to accept and feedback wherein others would be able to give you insights into how they perceive yourself. But there's also like in Shuhari's window, right? There's a part of you that you're probably not aware of. So feedback is really an integral part of that in terms of your self-awareness. And there's also still a part of you, no matter in what phase you are in your career, that you are yet to discover. So I think in all those concepts of self-awareness, at the very fundamental level, that's very important for somebody who wants to get an edge over others. And then another thing is being very adaptable, because we know that our world today is ever changing, and there's really just so many sophisticated skills now being required as well here and there. So the adaptability of someone who is able to operate in a VUCA world, we call it, and being exposed to diversity would really help somebody to be as adaptable as possible in a very fast paced and very, urgently changing world. And the third one is to be just to be brave and to try something out when you are presented with an opportunity, just to grab that opportunity, whether that's to really apply to an to, let's say, a job vacancy, or to really start a venture. And being brave also entails, like, aside from seizing the moment, but also being able to really contribute in more ways than one in the choices that we make in life. And in your second question was on the, sorry,
On
Craig.
measure, on how do you measure or report success both to your team, but also to the university leadership or board?
Right. There's really a lot of metrics, but we anchor ours on the strategic goals of the institution. So of course, there's the mission of the institution, to really develop our next generation leaders and managers that would contribute to businesses and societies. But generally speaking, for career services, it's a lot to do with students' outstanding experience. So generally, it includes everything from when they join, prior to joining the institution, what their experiences of their perception is about students studying here and students graduating out of the institute, um, until they get into their specific programs, whilst doing their academic requirements, and also experiencing as much exposure as possible with the people that they are able to interface with, the companies that they're also already able to speak with, the representatives, the hiring managers, across industries, so that they also get that kind of exposure to various roles, job types, industries that are emerging and that are sunset industries, so that they get that full picture as well. And even being able to network with those who've already graduated and who are already well situated in their respective roles and organizations, so that they also be guided. There's also kind of like a mentorship that we are trying to do, where in that in terms of metrics, at least their feedback and the mentor's feedback of these students they get to mentor, excuse me, we are able also to report back. And of course, there's placements, and in terms of how many of those looking for opportunities are able to secure the opportunities while they're still in the program, when they graduate, and once they leave the program, and maybe some years on, aside from the salaries that they are able to get, in terms of like the percentage of salaries prior against the one that they are able to receive after they graduate from the institution. So those are just some of the metrics. There's also metrics coming from the employers about perhaps what their perception is of hiring somebody from the institute, and in terms of what competencies they look for. So there are qualitative and quantitative kinds of metrics that we're also able to kind of report back to the institute.
Okay, so just one thing, can you explain Johari's window? Heba says it's an amazing concept, and maybe not everybody knows what that is. So actually I don't. So just explain.
Yes. So as I've mentioned, in terms of self-awareness, so in Johari's window, there's actually four quadrants, right? And that quadrant of oneself, and one's capability of communicating what one's strengths are, where their interests lie, and perhaps their kind of like values lie as well. And then there's another window, you could call it, in the quadrant, where it's actually what the person and also others think about that person in terms of perception, and how these two are actually, you could say, aligned. And whereas the other one, the first one that I've mentioned, is more of just that person being aware, and that our others are not yet aware of, but they actually communicate so as to build that awareness in others. And there's that third quadrant where it's actually called our blind spot, where we actually don't realize that we act on certain behaviors that other people recognize that we don't. And so through feedback, we're able to get that information through and process it for ourselves. And the fourth quadrant is the unknown, wherein it's actually where we're able to still yet discover more things about ourselves through the experiences that we have. And throughout our career and life cycle, which I say is a cycle because we always go back to the sense of self awareness at any stage in our careers. Then, if we are all able to work our way around realizing these four areas in terms of our self awareness, then we can manage better uh, how we present ourselves to the world.
Okay, thank you so much. And I put a link in, people can find more. And it's, I mean, I understand a lot of the concepts. I actually didn't know the name of the model. So it's, so a question is, since we're focusing on career tips for people from the global South seeking to work in social impact opportunities, first is, what do you see, whether it's Southeast Asia or, South Asia or Latin America, what do you see as the growth areas? Like, what sectors do you see a huge growth and opportunity in impact careers, either among your students or just in general trends that you're seeing?
Mm. So, in terms of what I encounter in my line of work, either looking at those accelerating their careers or perhaps making career changes as well. And because we, in our line of work, try to speak with hundreds of hiring managers, recruiters, and employers, you could say, we see certain trends in certain directions. Of course, during the pandemic, and as we go along with this reopening of economies and all, we see, of course, the frontline sector, or those involved in the management of this COVID-19 pandemic, as a growing strongly in number, particularly. And there's also those that are, let's say, I'm speaking about impact careers at the moment, but I'll also share a bit about maybe other areas of growth as well. Let's say also for governments, they kind of have this tendency now to also develop the skills also of those individuals who try to be resilient during these times, and depending on the demands of the, let's say, labor market. um, and the idea generally is that we just become prepared for the future. So, what we could see in terms of trends of what hiring managers share as their needs are is the need to produce talents that are capable in terms of digital, in terms of being green, and in terms of hybrid and remote. Um, and as we know, talent is still the world's most precious resource. So those talents who are able to, gain momentum in terms of their knowledge in data science or AI. There's also this trend for cybersecurity and for fintech. And there's much of this searches in terms of job searches online. HBR data say 5% also go into the digital economy jobs kind of searches. So and that's to reemphasize what I've just mentioned about talents who are adept in the digital space. In terms of the green jobs that I was mentioning, so these are, as we are facing climate change as also predominantly, and there's scarce natural resources across the globe. So there's also need for talents that are very much concerned with, these strong ethical and ecological kind of agenda. And in terms of flexible work arrangements, as you know, we've proven in the past, you could say, couple and a half years since the pandemic, their places to work is not just remote but also hybrid already. So it could be roles that are able to be realized and accomplished whenever, wherever. And we saw that also in terms of in trends in our internships, for example, wherein the students are able to already intern in organizations based outside not just of the country but of the continent as well across the globe, wherein they're able to really accomplish some of these very important roles and tasks for organizations despite the distance. So this flexibility in terms of where people work and what time they're going to work, and how are they able to set meetings with people across the globes, across time zones and everything. This is kind of like a trend where our future of work will be headed towards.
Mhm. Thank you so much. So we actually have a key question. So, Heba, so, how do you personally, or let's say aim, define like what is, I mean, all careers can have an impact, but if we're talking about things that are contributing to the sustainable development goals, or at least making the world better, like how do you define impact? And a question I have on top of that, of the students or alum that you engage with, I'm curious, do you see increasing interest in making sure the careers are not just providing personal satisfaction, but making the world better? Or is it, are you seeing a trend like that?
Yes. So when we say, at least to in terms of impact careers, we could really say that these are scalable kinds of careers that have influence not just within a smaller community but really widespread. And with the collaborative nature of work now more than ever, I think then when we say impact careers, it spans across geographies, it spans across cultures and time zones as well. So there isn't a limit to the specific field or, let's say, organization that can create impact, especially now that we're all kind of like working towards achieving SDGs that are already how many years more down the line, like 8 more years, right? 2030. So in order to really achieve those goals, I think working in silos will not work anymore. Then there has to be really strategic partnerships and collaborations across industries, across specialties, if you could call it that, and so forth.
So
Sorry,
thank you.
Craig. I think
Oh yeah, no,
I'm.
sorry. Yeah, the next question's coming from Nonto Beko. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Do you think employers will be more open to employees having multiple employment concurrently, consultancies? So the idea that partially because of the gig economy and partially just in general, do you see a trend where people don't just have one position, but they're doing two or three things at the same time, and are employers becoming more flexible in that approach?
Yeah, I think so. I think this trend, even before the pandemic, has also happened already. However, because then with the flexible nature of work now that we've undergone, it has just become more apparent. So being able to do it, particularly for impact jobs, for example, where in consulting work could be as flexible as possible depending on the commitment and the timelines. I think multiple juggling multiple roles is already a trend, and is already there. But as to the effectiveness of juggling several roles, it's really up to the individual, and of course, the commitment has to be there, and in terms of fulfilling all those promises made at the onset, right? And as much as the skill is concerned, depending on how much influence also these kinds of projects will be able to have globally.
Okay. So please keep the questions and comments coming and let us know where you're watching from. So a follow-up question, well, two questions. So one is, since the majority of students from AIM will come from, let's say the terminology Global South is dumb, but let's say, from Southeast Asia, South Asia, some other regions, what is the most common mistake you'll see students or alum doing either in their materials, resume or cover letter, or as they start a job search that you would advise anyone who is looking for an opportunity connected to global impact, like, please don't do this and please try to do this?
Right. So in terms of the resumes I see recently, right? Because we are also having such flexibility now in terms of the roles we could do, whether remotely or not. One thing I see in resumes is that people don't actually say where exactly they do the work, if it's remote or not remote. So sometimes these claims of just mentioning where the organization is at, but not really being there in that specific location could be troublesome in terms of the ethics of it. Uh, I think the way to go is still authenticity and honesty. So, in terms of just being upright in what we write in the resumes and for how long we're doing a particular project or role, and for which and in which locations these are actually affecting or being completed at. I think that's something that, in terms of just that, is still needed to be seen. And there's also an emphasis on competencies, because a lot of times I see resumes as like job descriptions, which it should be not, wherein the tasks are kind of like copy pasted, if not just specific actions, but do not really emphasize accomplishments or achievements. And it's really in providing the metrics to the tasks that the achievements get highlighted. And these could also take in the form of not only qualitative kinds of metrics too, but as I've said, like quantitative ones is also possible in terms of feedback, in terms of perceptions shared by immediate supervisors or whatnot. So, but it's just in the matter of phrasing, and in systematically making sure that the statements, the bullet points, emphasize, as I've said, not just only the actions, but also the purpose of the task and the measure of the achievement of that task.
Yeah, I just want to agree with that so much. I've seen thousands of resumes and lots of them look beautiful or use keywords, but the question is like, so what? Like what
So,
impact,
yes,
outcome, or result happened? That
correct.
So a very simple question. What do you think in terms of resume length? So let's say someone with 5 to 10 years experience in private sector versus an INGO. Like, there's always a debate. Like, what, according to you, like, what do you guide your students and alum in terms of how long a resume should be?
Right. So in our institution, we really encourage one-page resumes, and it could go as long as 2 to 3, but depending really on what is, in essence, in the content. That's more important than the length of it. And I do encounter resumes that go as long as 10 pages, which is not necessary, but it's more of a CV in a sense already. When it's also applicable maybe to more academic type of line of work, because then you'd have your publications listed and everything. But we'd have, for those at least working for the corporate sector for development, let's say, it could be reduced significantly, and just by emphasizing competencies over the list of tasks, because that next employer don't necessarily have to see everything that you've done. They only want to see things that you've done that are relevant for them. And when you kind of study the job description and put your resume against that, just making sure that it meets what is being asked for, then there's the change there that you're able to significantly reduce your resume to 1 or 2 pages.
Okay.
That's the most ideal for now. And because also a lot of our resumes are being looked at by ATS, right? At the moment already, instead of like actual persons looking at your
So,
qualifications.
so more questions have come in, but I want to just follow up on that. So applicant tracking systems, can you demystify for people who don't fully understand if an employer is using an ATS, like when you've hired in any of your roles or you're working with corporate partners or nonprofit, like the process, like what an ATS goes, like your resume gets submitted or your cover letter, and then if it's not just a human reviewing, it goes through an ATS, like what actually happens?
Yes. So when applications go through ATS, so normally like we get, especially the more established organizations where they have their own, you could say, job portal systems, websites where you upload your resumes, but not. Although there may be formalities and some others do review your resume in person, but still, like these job application and tracking systems are able to significantly reduce and make sure that they're efficient in their hiring, reduce time, if I may say, and be efficient in their hiring systematically if the applications particularly come from across the globe, right? And it sifts through those keywords where um, these are also pre-selected by, of course, those who are hiring, particularly the hiring managers um, w- and the recruiters themselves. So when they do that, then the resumes get shortlisted in a sense, um, longlisted, shortlisted, and those shortlisted resumes are the ones that are reviewed by the hiring managers, then get chosen for interviews. So basically, the resumes are there not to get you the job, but to get you that interview. And I presume that with that interview, then you get the job as well.
Okay, so just one follow-up comment. So I had a fellowship for my dissertation research. I was supposed to pursue employment with the U.S. government in return for having the fellowship, and I applied for a number of federal jobs, like at USAID, and I wasn't getting interviews. And I have a friend in government. He's like, "Dummy, like you have to use in the U.S. government, it's called knowledge, skills, and abilities, like KSAs." And you
Yes.
have to make sure you use the exact framing and words. And then I listened to him, and then I started getting interviews. So
Yes.
like really paying attention to that. But here's a question. I think this is a user from India or someone watching. So if you don't have formal education, let's say in the impact related sector, like, so let's say someone has training in accounting or, something that maybe doesn't traditionally fall into fields connected to impact sector. What's your advice for, I think this is a she, I forgot your name, I apologize, but like, what would be your advice for someone who's like, I don't want to just have a job. I want to do something that is making my community world better, but I don't have, let's say, the formal academic training.
Yeah. So in terms of transitioning, perhaps I think the transferable skills is the first way to go in terms of what you've actually um, experienced for yourself or gained in terms of skills in your previous work that you're able to carry forward. But at the same time, to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to go and knowing what's actually missing, then there are a plethora of certifications as well that are available online and in institutions such as ours as well. So they're customized, trainings, or you could say workshops or certifications or diploma courses. And there's also those that are already like set up and taught, whether in an asynchronous or synchronous format, remote or in person. So
Okay.
I think a lot of institutions, including AIM, has now become very flexible in that aspect.
Okay. So this is a perfect time to share a little bit about who comes to AIM to study, and obviously not the complete list of programs, but what are you offering in terms of training, both graduate degrees and professional certifications, and a little bit about, let's say, the age or average profile of your student body, and then maybe costs and or fellowships.
Right. So in terms of the scope of the schools at the Asian Institute of Management, it started out as a business school, right, in the 60s. And MBA is the, you could say, flagship program, but it has also diversified over the years. So it already has an executive MBA after that. And there's also a development school, which houses a master in development management and master in disaster risk and crisis management. And in the more recent years, we've had a School of Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship, which also houses data science and innovation in business and entrepreneurship. But to add to it, like just in this year, we've added two programs as well in cybersecurity and in online MBA because we've learned throughout the past couple of years that online could work. And we're actually adding international business law and fintech pretty soon. Those are for the degree offering programs, but for the short courses, of course, there's like stackable, you could say, very specific deep dive functional courses as well. In the whether also in development or marketing or let's say a bit of accounting, and so forth, and even cybersecurity even, um, and all these are offered at the institute. So you can visit our website if you want to learn more details about it too.
Okay, so we have about 5 more minutes, 7 more minutes. So this is from Heba and Jordan. There's a growth of third-party organizations that bridge compensation benefits with the legal requirements of different countries, making hiring more global. However, there's still a gap between soft skills in global south and the rest of the world, which can be a challenge in hiring. So one is, I guess, to frame, I mean, one, there's great places like Deal and Velocity and On Top that are providing the first base, that are providing the infrastructure for the remote global economy so that each employer doesn't have to figure out, if I'm based in Colombia and I want to hire someone in India, like to figure out all those legal challenges is a nightmare, but there's increasingly companies that are providing that as a service. So it's almost as hiring as a service, and they do all the paperwork and legal and benefits. So, what are your thoughts, in terms of, I guess, one, if people are specifically working, let's say I have a friend who just got hired in Colombia, but works for a global North organization. So that's a really nice thing where if you don't want to leave your country and you can
Yes.
get hired by a global organization and get a global equity salary, so it's not where it's pay adjusted. So what
Right.
are your thoughts for people who want to get remote opportunities in the impact sector, how to be competitive? And then what Heba is saying here in terms of both how to better represent your skills or get the training you need to be more competitive.
Right. So in terms of competitiveness, it's really a lot to do with how you're able to synergize and collaborate in a bigger scale, and also how much impact you're able to affect in a way, in a sense, in terms of the work that you do. The more interpersonally exercised you are and exposed in terms of your network broadened by the type of work that you do, regardless of what specific like functional or programmatic kind of deep dive that job entails, the more competitive it becomes in the job market. And in terms of the issues and the resilience also that you're able to overcome, I think in areas where there are more challenges, there are more opportunities as well. I'm a pure believer of this. So, in terms of the influence that you're able to create from the work that you do and the network that you're able to also broaden, then that's your competitive advantage. Um, the the world is a an entire place for learning. I think there's no one place where you can only stay at and have that thing experienced and learn, but it's really a lot to do with people that you also attract and share knowledge to you as much as you are also sharing to them. Yeah,
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
Yes, I mean it's a big question. I mean, there's I don't know who said this. Talent is the universally distributed, opportunity isn't, and that's one of the remote economy is starting to change that, but there's still so much inequity and imbalance in
Yeah,
salaries and hiring.
yeah,
Um,
that's a big.
so
That's another topic for a longer discussion. Yes.
So Paul, I'm going to summarize Paul's question. It's a little bit, I mean, it's very, so he's basically saying, is it, if you're supposed to be adjusting your CV and or cover letter to different jobs, is that actually ethical? Because some people would say you're trying to pitch
Yes.
yourself to the job when you're maybe not being totally authentic. So what is your advice if someone is applying for a job? Should you customize your resume and cover letter to each opportunity? And how do you be authentic?
Mm.
Because employers, like, how do you balance that between
Right.
customizing and being authentic?
Right. When I said earlier about adaptability, I think that's where you are also able to exercise when your adaptability, when you're trying to make sure that your resume um, answers the need that is being asked for by a certain organization, a certain role. There's not one size fit all kind of resume. There is maybe to you only, but to the organizations at which are requiring different, a very diverse set of skills and competencies, and as Dr. Craig mentioned, knowledge, skills, and attitudes. These cannot all be the same across organizations. Your authentic self would come out in the sense that when you get that interview, you share what you truly believe in and why you're doing the things, why you've done the things you've done, and at which direction you would like to stir your career towards. But in terms of what you write down, of course, you only write down what's authentic, what's true in terms of your particular experience, because only you are the person, only you experience what you've experienced and no one else could. So that in itself is already authentic. But you don't have to create scenarios where they didn't really happen just to for you to fit into what the employer is looking for. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That wherein what you write there is actually your actual experience, but then you only tailor fit it to what the employer is looking for. Yeah,
And
you don't have
I'll just
alternate
make
realities.
I'll just make one comment there. So the way I like, if an employer asks for a cover letter, not everybody does, but
Mm,
my advice is you need to frame the cover letter and resume to show why your entire career is destined you for this opportunity without being egotistical. And so it's more showing and telling rather than saying you're great. And
yes.
but
So
putting that into a compelling story is so important, or pieces of the puzzle. Because I have a career client I worked with who I think wrote one of the best cover letters I've ever seen in my life,
wow.
and got to the final round, didn't get that particular job, but the first version was really boring. It was like, yes, I can do the job, and then she put that ideal balance which fit for the organization hiring about her story, why this, like, so it's like that combination, but it's a delicate balance.
Very,
So
very delicate balance.
I'm going to bring in one more question, then I'll probably have one or two more. So Avinash, thanks. How do you bridge the gap between academic competency and career competency? So, so maybe academic
Mm,
qualifications versus,
right. Yes, and just personal upskilling, I presume.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think where I'm at now is a graduate school, and where we also highly value, of course, further education. And I do not discount the fact that there are so many opportunities for learning now and at your own pace if you want to. But at the same time, where we're situated, if it's an educational institution, is where a lot of enlightened business leaders, if not impact leaders as well, could only be found under one roof. And I think there's really value in that, um, getting people to, from all aspects, whether it's academe or practitioners and students, and all these great insights coming together, where students really learn about trends and issues, and not necessarily having to come up with solutions already, but thinking about many solutions that, depending on who would use those solutions later on, would benefit a lot from. And these insights, from global leaders, of those who are teaching, and also those who are learning from each other among students, I think there's really value in it, as opposed to just being fed the information from a screen, for example. So I think that's my stand on this. And if there's anything, it's where the place where academics, corporates, and strategic, partners, and even your peers, you learn a lot from your peers all together. I think there's value in getting those information all together, within the framework of a very, in a way, you could say, education is a structured framework, but it's also very rigorous, and the training, is incomparable, if I can call
Okay.
it that.
So I'll ask one more question and we'll start to wrap up. So you talked in the beginning about, there's a lot of research that shows that women tend not to negotiate salaries as much as men. It's not true universally. So whether it's for women or people in the global south, if someone gets a job offer, what is your wisdom and experience about how to better, like, should someone, like if you get an offer, let's say, it depends where you're based, but a good competitive offer, should someone always try to negotiate? And if yes or not, and then any special advice for women social impact professionals?
Yes. Yes. Okay, great. We know for a fact that gender pay gap is real, and particularly for women who are in the same position as, let's say, men. In terms of negotiation, there is that kind of, not just lack of confidence, but it's really more of, women putting their foot down and saying that, I think this is how much I deserve in terms of offers. So my advice, particularly for salary offers, is to really know what you're able to put um, on the table in terms of what is being asked. And if in terms of that salary, you also have not just to accept what is being offered, but do your own due diligence of research how much salaries are provided for this particular position in your home country, globally, and also within this organization. If you are able to find out what grading did they have, you could only get insights also, if not online, but also asking people who have worked in the organization, who are working in the organization. It takes a lot of effort, but at the same time, that effort pays off, because if you're able to equip yourself with information, with data, then you're able to better position yourself and negotiate, because you have your information with you to back you up. So
Okay, thank you so much. So just to wrap up, two quick questions, and then I know it's getting late in the Philippines, so I want to be respectful of your time. So one is, you're currently doing a master's. Like, what challenge are you working on in skills for yourself, like as a professional, or in your own time? And what from your current learning, because you're working on green transition, like, what else do you hope others might start working on? Because obviously the climate talks are coming up and they're not likely to do much. A lot of
yes.
talk, not much action. So, what is your urging around skills development?
Right. So at the moment, this is an ongoing, just transition is an ongoing research of mine. And it's really a lot to do with how perhaps also on the local level, we're able to, there's just so many, you could say, toolbox being shared in terms of just transitions and how we're countries are able to perhaps meet net zero commitments by 2030, by 2050. But also, this is something I just would like to see and investigate further on the local level as well. And with so many efforts being done on it, and how we'd be able to kind of uh, see where we're at in terms of the efforts being done in our country and in other countries, and even in companies, depending on the market, the region, and the sector, how we're doing it, and ensuring that no one really is left behind in terms of jobs in the process, in the transitions to a greener economy. So I just hope that with this study, more will join us in on this unrelenting kind of like focus on our mission to inspire um, just transition to really happen, full blown, and more support, I suppose, for this as well, because at the end of the day, it's really that talent is our key uh, driver for our economies.
Okay, and then last question again, and please follow Jade on LinkedIn. Check out the Asian Institute for Management and their programs. Look at PCDN, and this podcast, this live stream is already on LinkedIn as we finish, and the podcast episode will be out in 2 or 3 weeks. So the last question is, where do you go, whether you're like, what is your place to find inspiration and news on sustainable and impact careers? So like, where do you go to be inspired and not depressed about kind of all the things happening?
Of course, I tune into PCDN podcast in terms of, I think there's so much value in the discussions that you're having, not just in the podcast, but also in your involvement so much in the impact space, Dr. Craig. So
Okay.
thank you so much for all these things being shared. And also from the institute where I'm working at, we have a development school, Stephen Swillig School of Development Management. And I think a lot of full time and also even adjunct faculty are sharing a lot of their work through the students, and in the and in speaking directly with employer partners. Then we get those insights of how it is now in the job markets, particularly for the impact space. So, as much as we can, we would just like to echo it back to our next generation managers and leaders. So hopefully we'll be able in this kind of setup where we're strategically also sharing knowledge and insights, more will benefit from it.
Okay, so thank you so much for spending time in your evening, and thank you people for everyone watching and joining from around the world. It was nice to see the questions. Please do check out the 100 other episodes, and then our next podcast will be on November 30th with a founder from Singapore who actually launched a really interesting startup called warmspace.io, which is using the best of like online engagement for human connections. And then we'll have one December 8th with the co-founder of Shortlist Hires, which does a lot of social impact hiring, like a headhunter. So please stay tuned, and you're getting lots of thank yous. And again, please share the episode and subscribe to PCDN and all these other great channels. And thank you so much, Jade, especially one for sharing all your wisdom and also doing this at a later time because of the global time difference.
Yes.
Okay.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be in your